If you've been paying attention to the Florida housing market over the last few years, you've probably noticed something strange happening. Depending on which headline you read, the market is either booming, cooling off, stabilizing, or heading toward a correction. Some analysts point to rising inventory and say buyers are finally getting a fair shot. Others look at affordability and argue that home ownership is slipping further out of reach for ordinary families. Meanwhile, longtime residents are wondering whether prices will keep climbing. Newcomers are trying to figure out which city actually fits their budget. And prospective buyers are stuck asking themselves whether now is really the right time to make a move. What's fascinating is that all of these perspectives contain at least some truth. Florida's housing market is no longer the simple story it was during the pandemic boom. Back then, almost everything pointed in the same direction. Demand was surging. Inventory was disappearing. Mortgage rates were near historic lows. And prices seemed to rise month after month. Whether you were a first-time buyer, a seasoned investor, or someone who only glanced at real estate headlines occasionally, the trend was obvious. Today, that certainty has disappeared. Instead of a market driven by fear of missing out, Florida is entering a period defined by something more complicated. Buyers are returning, but they're moving carefully. Sellers are listing homes, but they're finding that the rules have changed. Communities are continuing to grow, but they're also grappling with serious questions about affordability, insurance costs, and long-term sustainability. In many ways, the market has entered a phase that's far more interesting than the boom itself. Because now, we're beginning to see what happens when extraordinary conditions fade and the underlying realities of housing come back into focus. To understand where Florida is heading, we first need to understand how it got here. For much of the last decade, Florida was one of the most desirable destinations in the entire country. Population growth remained strong. Job opportunities expanded. The state's reputation for warm weather, no state income tax, and a lower cost of living compared to the Northeast and West Coast attracted people from everywhere. Cities like Tampa, Jacksonville, Orlando, and Naples became magnets for new residents. Even smaller communities experienced growing demand as people searched for affordability, space, and quality of life. As more people arrived, housing demand increased. Unfortunately, supply didn't keep pace. Building new housing is rarely a simple process. It requires land, labor, materials, financing, infrastructure, and local approval. Even under ideal circumstances, adding enough homes to meet rapidly growing demand can take years. When demand consistently exceeds supply, prices tend to rise. And that's exactly what happened throughout much of Florida. Then came the pandemic. Looking back, it's difficult to overstate just how dramatically the pandemic reshaped housing markets across the country. Suddenly, millions of Americans found themselves reevaluating where and how they wanted to live. Remote work made location less important for many professionals. People who had previously needed to live near downtown offices discovered they could work from almost anywhere. At the same time, historically low mortgage rates increased purchasing power, allowing buyers to afford larger homes and higher prices than would have been possible under normal circumstances. Florida became one of the biggest beneficiaries of these trends. Demand surged, inventory vanished, competition intensified, stories of bidding wars became common. Homes received multiple offers within days, sometimes within hours. Buyers waived contingencies, skipped inspections, and offered well above asking price just to secure a property. For a period of time, the market seemed almost unstoppable. But markets don't move in one direction forever. Eventually, affordability became a challenge. Home prices climbed rapidly, and then mortgage rates began rising. What many people failed to appreciate at the time was how powerful the combination of those two forces would be. Rising home prices alone can make housing less affordable. But when those higher prices are paired with significantly higher borrowing costs, the impact becomes much more severe. Consider a household shopping for a home during the low-rate environment of the pandemic years. That family may have been able to comfortably afford a monthly mortgage payment on a home priced at a certain level. Fast forward a few years, and even if that home's price remained unchanged, the higher mortgage rate could increase the monthly payment dramatically. Suddenly, the same property requires a much larger share of household income. That affordability shock changed buyer behavior almost overnight. Many potential buyers stepped back from the market. Some assumed rates would quickly fall again and decided to wait. Others believed prices would decline substantially and chose to remain on the sidelines. Some simply found themselves unable to qualify for the homes they had hoped to purchase. Activity slowed, and for a brief period, it seemed as though the Florida housing market might be heading toward a much more significant downturn. Yet something interesting happened. Instead of collapsing, the market adapted. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of housing. People often assume that if demand weakens, prices must immediately crash. In reality, housing markets are influenced by a wide range of factors, many of which move slowly. Homeowners don't necessarily sell simply because market conditions change. Builders adjust construction activity. Buyers alter expectations. Lenders tighten or loosen standards. The market responds, but rarely in a straight line. As the initial shock of higher rates faded, buyers gradually began returning. However, they returned with a completely different mindset than the one that defined the pandemic boom. During the frenzy of 2020 and 2021, many buyers were driven by urgency. They feared being permanently priced out if they didn't act immediately. Every month seemed to bring higher prices, greater competition, and fewer opportunities. That environment encouraged rapid decision-making and aggressive offers. Today's buyers are different. Rather than fearing they'll miss out, many fear they'll overpay. That psychological shift may sound subtle, but it fundamentally changes market behavior. A buyer who fears missing out is likely to rush. A buyer who fears overpaying is likely to slow down, compare options, negotiate, and walk away if something doesn't feel right. This is precisely what we're beginning to see across many parts of Florida right now. And yet, even as buyer behavior has shifted, Florida continues to draw people in. Because life continues. People get married, families grow, careers change, children are born, parents retire, job opportunities emerge in new locations. Regardless of market conditions, people continue making housing decisions because housing is fundamentally tied to life itself. Eventually, many households realize they can't wait forever for perfect conditions. They begin evaluating the market based not on predictions, but on their own needs and circumstances. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. One of the biggest expenses Florida homeowners often overlook isn't their mortgage. And it isn't just insurance, though Florida's insurance crisis has become a serious concern all by itself. It's property taxes. Over the past several years, home values across Florida have increased significantly. And while that's been great for many homeowners' equity, it has also led to higher property assessments across the state. The effects aren't being felt equally everywhere. Some cities have experienced much stronger appreciation than others. Fast-growing metros, desirable coastal communities, and thriving inland markets have all seen significant increases in home values. That means property owners in those areas are more likely to feel the effects of rising assessments. So let's take a look at 7 Florida cities consistently ranked among the best places to live, and examine what's really happening with housing in each one. Number 7. Jacksonville. Florida's largest city by land area has long offered something increasingly rare in this state: relative affordability. Strong job growth, a growing healthcare and logistics sector, and a younger median age have kept Jacksonville on the radar for buyers priced out of other Florida markets. But as more people have discovered what Jacksonville offers, demand has increased, values have followed, and the affordability advantage that once defined this city is slowly narrowing. Number 6. Melbourne. Tucked along Florida's Space Coast, Melbourne has quietly become one of the state's most intriguing housing markets. The growth of the aerospace and defense industries in the region has brought a steady stream of well-employed professionals. Home values have risen meaningfully over the past several years. For buyers looking for a mid-sized city with economic depth and a lower profile than Tampa or Orlando, Melbourne continues to stand out. But with that growing reputation comes growing prices. Number 5. Fort Myers. Fort Myers has transformed from a seasonal destination into a year-round community that attracts families, retirees, and remote workers alike. The area's combination of warm weather, Gulf Coast access, and historically competitive home prices made it enormously appealing during the pandemic years. Demand surged. Prices followed. And while Fort Myers remains more accessible than some of its neighbors to the south, the gap is shrinking. For buyers who waited hoping for a significant correction, the market has proven more resilient than many expected. Number 4. Tampa. Tampa has emerged as one of the defining housing stories of the last decade. A revitalized downtown, a thriving tech and finance sector, a celebrated food scene, and consistent job growth made Tampa a magnet for younger professionals relocating from more expensive cities. Home prices reflected that demand, climbing sharply during the pandemic and remaining elevated even as the broader market cooled. For buyers, Tampa still offers more value than many comparable metros. But make no mistake, the Tampa of today is significantly more expensive than it was just 5 years ago. Number 3. Pensacola. Pensacola represents something genuinely rare in today's Florida market. A desirable city that still offers meaningful affordability. With some of the most celebrated beaches in the country, a strong military presence, a growing healthcare sector, and a cost of living that undercuts much of the state, Pensacola has attracted growing attention from buyers searching for value without sacrificing quality of life. Home prices have risen here too. No Florida market has been entirely immune. But Pensacola's starting point was different, and for buyers willing to look beyond the state's more famous markets, it continues to offer opportunities that are increasingly hard to find elsewhere. Number 2. Sarasota. Sarasota occupies a fascinating position in the Florida housing conversation. It offers a cultural richness, an art scene, beautiful Gulf Coast beaches, and a quality of life that consistently earns top rankings from national publications. It has attracted a sophisticated mix of retirees, professionals, and families who value those qualities and are willing to pay for them. And pay they do. Sarasota's home values have climbed significantly, and property tax assessments have followed. For buyers with the budget to match their ambitions, Sarasota rewards handsomely. For those stretching to get in, the ongoing costs of ownership deserve serious attention. And number 1, Naples. This probably isn't a surprise. Naples consistently ranks at or near the top of Florida's best places to live lists, and for understandable reasons. The quality of life is exceptional. The beaches are stunning. The dining, healthcare, and community amenities are among the finest in the state. But Naples also carries some of the highest home values and property tax obligations in Florida. Buyers entering this market are not simply purchasing real estate. They are purchasing a lifestyle, and that lifestyle comes with ongoing costs that extend well beyond the mortgage. For those who can sustain them, Naples delivers. For those who cannot, the same qualities that make it so desirable also make it increasingly inaccessible. The encouraging news is that conversations about Florida housing are becoming more sophisticated. Rather than focusing solely on prices, people are increasingly examining the broader systems that shape housing outcomes. They're asking questions about insurance markets, infrastructure capacity, climate resilience, community design, and long-term sustainability. Those conversations don't always produce easy answers, but they may ultimately produce better ones. Because if Florida is truly entering a new chapter in its housing story, the future won't be determined solely by interest rates or inventory levels. It will be determined by the choices communities make about how they grow, who they accommodate, and what kind of future they want to build. And that question matters now more than ever. If you've enjoyed this analysis, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts below. Do you think Florida is heading toward a housing reset, or are we simply watching the market return to something more normal? What changes would you most like to see in your own community?
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more educational content. And as always, thank you so much for watching our videos. See you next time!